Um, Good evening. This is the March 21st meeting of the CPC 2023. And we'll start by doing roll call. And people remind us of how your appointment occurred. Nancy, you want to start us?
Nancy Nelson, representative of the Historical Commission.
Thank you. Eve?
Eve Eisenberg, Select Board appointee.
Thank you. Sarah?
Sarah Grimwood, Natural Resources Commission appointee.
Thank you. Charles?
Charles Phillips, Housing Authority appointee.
Thank you. Paul?
Paul Bohm, Recreation Commission appointee.
Thank you. John?
John Kratzley, Select Board appointee.
Burton?
Burton Flint, Select Board appointee.
And Diane Proctor, Select Board appointee. And welcome Dee Ortner behind that screen. Okay. Our FinCom observer and wise counselor. Let's begin by doing some project updates. The first is the project status report for FY 2023 through February 28th that Ann Clifford has sent out to all of us. Have you each had a chance to review it or look at it pretty carefully?
Not carefully.
But okay, but at least a quick review.
Yeah.
I wanted to point out, Anne, that and this is a little bit more tangential, but on our website, there's a couple things. Is that they don't list the meetings up until through now. It would suggest that our last meeting was a little bit ago. So we need to kind of fix that up on our site. But having read all the documents on that site over this afternoon, I noticed that the only one about which I have any question is Anna McEwen's, and her stuff is so good. It's so professional. But there is one question on it. Do you think you could pull that up in for a minute for us? And I'll just show you.
So her report or the summary?
Well, her report of
Her
the.
report, okay. Yes. Okay, here goes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And it may be I'm just misreading it, but we can figure this out together. So if we go down a little bit further, I mean, look at this. I mean, so professional and so amazing. But in this paragraph, in this one, what is the date of your project begin? The first bill was invoiced on January 13th, 2023, and covered services through December 30th, 2022. I think is that accurate? We will build through services February 24th to 2023. Is it cover services? That just seems an awkward sentence. Does it seem awkward to anybody else?
Mhm.
Go ahead.
I mean, I can see what is intended by it, but do you think it might be reworded to say that services, well, I guess it would say just what it says. It just strikes me as odd wording. But never mind. We can just
English teacher.
It's just okay. It's terrific. So did anybody have any questions? And thank you for asking all of the various reports to check in. And they've done so with real care, and that's really appreciated. And it clarified a lot of the issues that at least I originally saw in the report. I should note that the property, the information on the Haywood Meadow Restoration and Preservation. They have not been continuing to restore the wall, but they have continued to repair, to pull invasive species. And so I think that is an appropriate use of their funding. It was drawn to my attention that they needed to reapply for funding since it was a rather old funding. But as long as they're cleaving to the original intention of their request, it strikes me as okay. How does it strike others? Okay, everybody okay on that one?
Okay.
Okay, so that the invasive species continue to occur, and they've then gone in and continue to assail the invasive species in portions of the park.
It's making a big difference.
So I wanted to clarify that they're not going back to reconstruct the wall or do anything like that. That would require a reapplication. But I believe we're okay on this one. So if you all have any questions about it, I would urge you just to go back and read their report and think about that one.
I have a question on that. And I do have to read more about this, but is it actually fiscal year 12 or 21?
That's a good thing.
It was not,
Um,
20. It was fiscal year 21, I believe.
I think it actually is quite old.
The 12?
Whoa. That's very old.
Yeah, that's very old.
It is 12. It is fiscal year 2012.
Whoa.
Thank you
Crazy.
for clarifying.
So
Interesting.
there was the question whether they should be reapplying for funding in order to continue to attack invasive species. Because that was the original purpose, is to fix up the wall and attack invasive species. What do we think?
They've been stretching their budget over 11 years.
It looked like it, or 12.
Wow.
I think that was largely due to complications with the wall, right?
Right, that's exactly it.
There were those.
There were those. Okay, well, hearing no concern about that, are there any other questions for Anne? If you have questions, I urge you to go and read the updates that are now on our website. They're extensive and comprehensive and explain many things.
And I think you're doing a good job of identifying the projects to close. The other projects to me look like they're in control, or we understand why expenditures haven't occurred, like with Warner's Pond, but most of them look pretty steady as she goes. There's nothing sitting out there for long periods of time unexplained.
And that's the key point, isn't it? Unexplained, Paul. That's
Yeah.
that's beautiful language. That's precisely right. I was particularly interested and pleased to see the work on on the Wheeler Harrington House explained, because I couldn't quite figure out why that funding had not been explained, but the explanation is terrific, and gives us a lot of clarity. So it was a big help. So we're going to get some funds back, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how much in the end. John.
Oh, I was just gonna ask Ann where it says needs final report. Do you chase them for those final reports, or
I
do they
do.
have do you have a due date?
I haven't had a due date. This was sort of a short notice request. So I asked them for just brief summaries, and if they had time to put together a report now, that would be great. But I did suggest by the end of April to have a report to us.
And this was really, John, as you all probably know, in response to the FinCom's concern that there were a lot of funds dangling out there that were unspent or unaccounted for. And so this provoked on our part, a very thorough review of each of the projects. And in the end, once all those reports are finalized, Ann and I will sit down with Paul, who is the treasurer, and see whether we have some excess funds that we can close out reports and move those over to our general account for next year's expenditure. And
So-
go ahead, Paul.
And if I remember correctly, it's been so long since we had a meeting. At our last meeting or the meeting before, we kind of decided or suggested that the project status reports be done twice a year. And has that been implemented? Has that been communicated? Have we agreed on that? I forgot where we left that.
But I was just looking over the notes from last meeting, and that was brought up at the last meeting. Would
Yeah.
you like me to include it into the procedures manual? And then let people know?
Well, I'm not sure. Did we agree on that? Did we vote on that? Do we need to vote on that? I'm not sure.
I don't think we need to vote on it, Paul. I just think it makes
Okay.
common sense, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
I think so.
We need to hear from them on a more regular basis, because otherwise, we're left wondering whether the funds are being appropriately, used.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
And just reading over the reports that have come in, I learned a great deal about the projects, the progress of projects that were otherwise vague and abstract. So getting twice a year reports, I think, is minimally a responsible form of behavior. And I presume Anne will put that in any applications going forward. We'll adjust the applications going forward to indicate that twice a year we would expect reports to occur. Everyone agree with that, or any?
Just to say, not in the applications, but in the grant agreement, right?
Yes, exactly.
Right. Yeah.
But I would even put it in the application, Burton, just so people know that
Yeah.
that's the
Okay.
kind of expectation, is that, that would be
Okay.
hope. Okay. Warner's Pond dredging presentation. I hope you all had a chance. Did everybody have a chance to read through the slides or to attend the meeting? I saw several of you there at the meeting, which was wonderful. So we had a chance to have a full throttle presentation. What reactions do people have? I will tell you that when I was presenting this at the public hearing, said that we were still waiting for final approval of this project until we knew that the public hearings were going forward and that there was some sort of consensus from the survey. Since talking with Delia going forward, they've certainly had their first public hearing. They will have a second, and she's been listening very attentively to neighbors and various suggestions of ways they might go forward. But one of the things that seemed stunningly clear to anybody watching that is, regardless of which way they go, except to do nothing, to take down the dam or to do some partial dredging, it's going to cost a lot of money. And so this $550,000 is it seems to me exactly what we should be doing, as we voted, before. I see no reason to withdraw that money or to sequester that money in any way. And I think that we all know that if Delia doesn't spend it, if they decide to do nothing, get the money back. So, it will just return to our coffers. Can I hear any discussion of that,
Yeah.
of that idea or point of view?
Well, first, I think she and the consultant did an excellent job at
Mhm.
the meeting. It was very transparent, very open, very candid. There were pros and cons. Nobody was selling anything or any one solution. They were presenting it very openly. I did the revelation, the light bulb went off to me when she started talking about dam removal. I had never thought about dam removal being sort of an option that the public would agree to or maybe solve the problem. But on the financial side, it's clear to me that if dam removal was the preferred option, that it might cost the town a lot less because there'd be grant money available. There's other sources of funding. The state and various entities that protect fisheries are very anxious to remove dams for free flowing, small fish up and down. So on the cost side, it might cost the town a lot less.
Right. Really hopeful that's true, aren't we all? I'm sure I know she is as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, so they'd have to explore that to
Yeah.
see whether, if they selected that option. Right now, the costs look about the same, the way it was estimated, 3 million and change for each of the options. But I thought that was a very interesting discussion. And ecologically, there's not a great downside to dam removal.
No.
Aesthetically, it's up for debate depending on whether, where you sit physically. I know some of the abutters were taken aback by the idea of it's not removing the pond, it's reducing it to a smaller pond adjacent to Giroux. I did like the fact that in the discussion, Giroux was brought into the equation, which makes a lot of sense, even though that project has its own issues and problems. Eventually, that will be a prime source of access to even the smaller pond that's left. If dam is removed, if the dams are removed, it'll be a larger pond. So I think she's in no position right now to decide on which option. And I don't think anybody can tell the public exactly what option is going, but I think the money is going to be needed for any option. And maybe there'll be money clawed back if they get grant money later on. That would be a good thing 2-3 years from now.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Sarah, and then Charles.
I also agree. It was an excellent public hearing, very, very informative and interesting. My understanding, Paul, is that the removing the dam is actually the preferable option from an ecological point of view, but there would be benefits either way, which is interesting to me. But what was really interesting to me was I expected to hear a lot of opposition at the meeting about dam removal, but I mean, it's early days. There's a lot of people who need to think about it and be there, but I was kind of surprised that that wasn't just because I had understood previously that because the town had put money into the dam relatively recently, I know there was concern about that, but then we learned at the meeting that the town was told they had to do that by the state. So that was interesting to me. Anyway, my understanding from talking to Delia is that, you know, recognizing that this is a huge decision for the town and we really need as many people as possible and everybody who would be affected to be able to weigh in, that the plan would be to certainly have another public meeting where I believe there'll be visual renderings of what it would look like with any options, because it's kind of hard for people to visualize at the moment. And the plan would be, I believe, that, you know, there would be there'd obviously be a clear recommendation made, but then we would be able to vote on it at town meeting in 2024, because this is clearly such a big decision that, you know, to get to a point where you have a decision, I think we probably need a vote. So that's my understanding of what Delia is thinking at the moment.
Well, I think that may be true, Sarah. Thank you so much. We're going to have to watch how this progresses. In the meanwhile, allowing her to bank the resources.
Yeah.
Well, that they'd come back to us if they're not needed. And particularly, as Paul wisely suggests, that state funding kicks in. It
Yeah.
would not kick in for the dredging. I mean, nobody wants to fund that. They will kick in for the bridge removal. And one of the things we've learned is that the state is actually requiring various towns to remove their dams. So
Yeah.
there's actually the possibility of state action that would require this. So it's as she's balancing it, I think, with great care. Thank you, Sarah, so much. Charles? You're muted, Charles.
Funny. Does anyone know what the result of the was of the questionnaire? You know, where they asked how many people
Right.
for the free.
The questionnaire was due back on the 15th or 16th of the 22nd or the 23rd of March, which is tomorrow or the day after, and they will then compile that information.
Yep.
Delia says that it's running so far in favor of dam removal, Charles.
Oh, interesting. And they have had a lot of responses. I can't remember the number, so I'm not gonna remember incorrectly, but there's been I know she was pleased with the responses, the number.
And I want to welcome Scott Harden. Scott, I don't know that we've met you before, but you're welcome to our meeting, and so thank you for joining us. Paul.
Yeah, my yellow hand's not working. I found it you attended the select board meeting last night, and they didn't get around to discussing the CPC. I do know, having spoken to some of the select board members, that there's some mixed feelings certainly about the dredging. So it'd be interesting what the select board's thoughts are on all of this, and we don't have that yet, so.
Oh, that's wonderful, Paul. And I think one of the points that I was then going to say is that FinCom and Select Board may, but FinCom has opted to vote for all all of our articles, but to remove E, which is the Warner's Pond, for thorough discussion and consideration once we know more about how that's going to go forward. So I suspect that if we present information to the select board after this meeting, if we have an agreement that we think we should fund it fully in any case, regardless of which way it goes, then I can send that information to FinCom and to the select board in advance of their meeting when they make final deliberations. But I only want to do that with the collective agreement of our group. So do I hear a motion to do that from anyone?
Repeat the motion again, Diane, the proposed motion.
Would be to say that we will fund this project. We recommend funding of this project this coming year, regardless of whether it's dam removal or dredging, with the thorough understanding that if it is dam removal and there is additional funding coming from the state, that those funds would be returned to us in due time.
I move to have the CPC support the funding of either project dredging or dam removal with the proviso that if any additional funding is available later on from the state, that be taken into account down the road.
Thank you, Paul, so much. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Thank you. Charles, discussion.
And just
Go ahead, Burton.
one quick question, or actually maybe a couple questions. I was not able to attend the meeting. I'm looking at the pictures of the alternatives of letting it just go to, continue to clog up, and dam removal. They look a lot alike.
Well,
It ends up not really when you read her report, but go ahead.
okay. Well, I was going to say one sort of slowly raises the level, the bottom of the lake, and one significantly lowers the top of the lake. So I was just sort of wondering, if you get to the same place, either way. The other, but I guess Delia probably got into the one has ecological benefits and the other does not. Okay. The other thing I guess I'd want to know is, just what's our total number then we've got towards Warner's Pond with this, given prior the two prior allocations I believe we've done, just so, because I'm just wondering what percentage of the total cost we're at under either of these two alternatives.
Well, we have allocated so far $750,000.
Okay.
With this additional $550,000, we would be at $1,250,000. Is that right? Somebody do the math quickly for me.
Yep.
Is that correct?
1.3.
I
Yeah, 1.3.
1.3. And
Okay.
she has banked some money on her own. She's been putting money aside in her budget over time, so that they combine to be actually exactly 3.5 million, so that they can cover either cost once our money kicks in.
So I'm sitting here, I would have thought dam removal would have gone over like a lead balloon, but so I'm sitting here a little gobsmacked that seems to be the preference. And I'm looking at the pictures, and the pictures are a lot better than I would have thought on dam removal myself. So, and the analysis is interesting. What I'm wondering is and it sounds like it's sort of a very sort of speculative thing that the state might put money towards it. I hope we wouldn't put ourselves into a situation where the state makes up the difference and we've just put another, we've got an additional chunk of funding that we're putting in that otherwise might be part of the difference that the state would make up if we go the dam removal route.
That's very
Is that
interesting.
clear?
Of course it is. I don't really know the politics of that. Does anyone know the politics of that? In other words, we handicapped her getting state funding by
Right.
funding
To some degree.
Some degree. And do you know?
I don't know. I haven't looked at their applications and what the state funding sources are. I'm sure Delia would know.
Okay.
I mean, I could imagine if it was something like up to $100,000 or up to $500,000 for dam removal, well, we're going to need every penny of CPC funding for sure. But if it's the practice has been that if the town contributes 20%, the state will contribute 80%, then it might be a very different calculation. We might be able to put this money towards something better. And I can't believe I'm saying these words because I want to protect Warner's Pond.
Can I add? I know we're in the middle of a motion here, so this keeps, but I just want to add
Motion, Paul, this is good. Go ahead.
another little financial twist, and that is, it is indeed possible that if we keep the dam intact, the state may require dam removal
Yes.
2, 3, 4, and then the town would have to pay for that removal. If there are opportunities now for grants to be proactive dam removal, those exist right now. So this is all highly uncertain on all ends of this, but I'm just kind of throwing that information out there. The other thing I'll add, the oblique views in her presentation look the same. The plan views looking down look quite different. And in the dam removal, there's actually a smaller pond adjacent to Giroux, but there is a stream that takes it all the way down to the Assabet River, past Neshoba Bakery.
Mhm.
You could presumably kayak, assuming it was
Oh,
the
yeah,
high enough
fair
water
point.
level and there weren't any rocks there. So it's a different end result.
I appreciate that clarity. Yeah, thanks.
Also provides for spawning opportunities for small fish, which then go back out and feed the larger fish. I mean, it's actually for all sorts of natural reasons. This would be a superb move in terms of supporting wildlife in so many ways, actually. Eve.
I sad I didn't get to go to the public meeting, but I watched it on YouTube and read the slides. And I didn't get a chance to finish watching all of the public comment yet, but back to the motion about fully funding the project, wasn't some of the money that we were setting aside for this to be used on these consultants that are doing this presentation? And is that all used up, or are we talking about different money?
Well, she has that money already, Eve, and so she's used it to help to pay for the consultant because she already has a lot of our money.
So the 550 is in addition to the consultant money. It's not.
That's right.
Okay.
I don't really know. Anne, has she used our money to pay the consultant, or has she? I thought I read that she had. Well, it looks as if she has. But that could also be for dredging, or she could be using it out of her own budget, Eve, because she also has money put aside. So I don't know whether she's pulled that from our resources or whether she's pulled it from her own budget.
I just remembered a discussion last year, if I could say that, about her using some of that money for a consultant while she was waiting to figure out what the rest of the money was going to.
Absolutely. That's a good
Well,
question.
I'm looking in the spreadsheet, and in the original money for funding the permitting, she came into this year with 28,000 left over, and so I think there may be some of that she's used for this, because she's spending that all in calendar year 23. So anyway, I think the bottom line is that she's using money she already had as opposed to earmarking this new money.
May I ask a question then? Should we entertain the notion of voting on Paul's motion with the understanding that we then approach Delia separately and ask her whether this would in any way handicap the Natural Resources Commission's ability to apply for state funding if the dam removal is the proposal they pursue? If it's not, we don't have to come back and revisit anything, so that rather than calling for another meeting so that we can vote, it seems to me prudent in terms of our collective time to go ahead, if we vote in the affirmative on this motion, to then vote for it and then approach Delia. And if she says, yes, it will, we'll come back and meet again and discuss what our best strategy ought to be. May I introduce one other complexity in this? Another complexity is that if the middle school comes to us for funding for fields our recreation and resources budget next year could be substantially tapped if we chose to do it, to contribute to that enterprise. So giving Delia this money to bank right now seems to me prudent because, for every possible reason. I know we can put it in reserve and she can call on it again, but it strikes me that it just makes some sense to go forward on this, but that's just my sensibility. Are there other comments? Yes.
Just on that point, you're saying, given that we may have a large ask next year, we wouldn't we wouldn't have the opportunity to contribute to Warner's next year.
That's not as concerned, Burton.
Yeah, sure. Though, would it provide us more flexibility if we banked it this year for recreation, and then it could go to Warner's or the school next year?
Well, we could. That's another option. She's going to need 100,000 to help pay for the consultant. I mean, that much I know.
But she's got 750 already on the books, right?
That's exactly right. How accessible that is, I don't know, but
Right.
Okay, let's see if we have an affirmative vote here on this one, and then if not, we'll go back and see if we can.
If I can make one final point, I'm sorry. What I'm inclined to go with your approach, because as we all know, or we likely all know, we can remove things right up to town meeting, but we can't add things. And we may get additional facts, and we'll have one of those meetings right before town meeting where we could say, hey, turns out that there's a $1 million, $2 million grant out there that Delia has already got an application in on, then we could withdraw it.
Right.
So
But we can't at this point,
but we can't add it. Yeah.
or increase it.
Right.
So there's been a second for Paul's motion. Do we need to repeat the motion?
Wow.
Is everybody ready to vote? Eve?
Yes.
Yes. And Nancy?
Aye.
John?
Yes.
Charles?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Burton?
Yes. Thanks.
And I do, I do as well. So it is affirmative and it is passed. I do so declare, as they say in our town meeting. Okay.
Just a question on reserve. Are we not pulling back the Christopher Heights open space funding at
That's-
town meetings? So
Yes.
we'll have 250 in reserve.
No, that, yes, we're
No?
getting that back. We've
We're
got
getting
that
that back.
coming back, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll have that extra $250,000. However, at the public hearing, Paul, one of the questions that was asked was, well, if we go forward, I don't know why we keep calling it Christopher Heights, but I guess it's so we all know what we're talking about.
It's Junction Village, really.
Or Junction Village or whatever. But if they go forward with a proposal, the question was, could they get that money back, in order to continue the development of that property? And my response was, and help me if you think this was wrong, my response was, yes, of course, that money would be available and for an application, but it was premised in a very important way on the builders contributing their heavy machinery to do a lot of the work for free, for that project. So that contingency would have to be in place in order for them to be able to go forward in any reasonable way. And I don't know whether they would or they wouldn't. But I did say that. I hope, was that okay? I mean, I hope that was okay.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
There's going to be a whole new design,
That's
in the next project. Who knows what it's going to look like?
exactly right. That's a really good point. It's going to be. So I don't know where Scott Harden went. Does anybody know why he might have been visiting? Okay.
Maybe he lives on Warner's Pond.
That could be.
Yeah.
Okay, reaffirmation of Article 26, the CPC appropriation recommendation. And so we've really in many ways just done that, but I guess we need to do that one more time. Um,
question, did you say the Warner's Pond discussion is being split out? That
That's what FinCom has chosen at this point, not to support our CPC article. To support it in all but E, which is the Warner's Pond. Because this public hearing happened the day before Delia was having her meeting. And so there was a lot of confusion as to how could we possibly say that we were supporting something when we didn't even know what we were supporting, and was this clear? And so there was considerable agitation, appropriately agitation, and very good questions posed. So they voted to support everything but that item until there's greater clarification. And so that's the reason I hope that what we just voted is that I would communicate with them that we're going to go forward in the recommendation of that funding, regardless of which project they undertake.
Yeah.
Yes, no, oh, Burton, I love it. What are you thinking?
I'm laughing at people moving around in my background. That's what I'm
Okay.
smiling about.
I've been watching somebody go in and out of the closet. Okay.
and Dan, well, I think communicating that to the select board, as you talked about earlier, would be important, because I had the feeling they were about to lower the boom on Warner's Pond, but they didn't get to it. But I had that feeling.
I did too. So I will we'll get a letter to them, tomorrow morning saying, stating that situation, and we'll get a letter to FinCom as well. Okay. So that they know that. So I don't really think we need to reaffirm Article 26, because in many ways we've just done this by the action that we've just taken. So, okay, other business. I hope you all had a chance to read the, lawyers, for heaven's sake, Burton and John, what do you do? Those that you're just under that language. I found myself thinking, I'm sure this is the way you talk to each other, but it was really something. So
Do we know who wrote it?
I have no idea. But it is certainly legalese. But it's an agreement with the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Agreement. And I have to say that Keith Bergman has been wonderfully communicative. I've spent, and this isn't like this, but I've spent hundreds of hours in housing committee meetings, summer, fall, and winter, in order so that we know as a committee what's going on in terms of affordable housing. We have Charles, of course, who's a pro and knows a great deal, but there have been a lot of negotiations that have been happening and discussions. So I've been keeping my ear to the ground as best I can so that our committee would be well informed. So
Thank you for that.
So this is really at Keith's and Ann's recommendation that there be a formal arrangement between the Concord Affordable Municipal Housing Trust Fund and CPC going forward. So has everyone had a chance to review it?
Yes.
Okay, may I hear a motion to move that we support?
I have some questions.
Go.
First, unless I'm missing something and I'm looking at it, so it refers to us funding the project, and the project being described on the exhibit or the appendix to the document, of which there isn't one. And
it's right.
And this is this is a classic thing with the lawyers write the opaque language at the front of the agreement, and the people that actually understand what's happening will in plain English write the description of what's going to be done, and that's the exhibit. I would love to see what the description of the project is. There's one other thing jumped out at me, is that it said that no more than 10% of the funds can be used for expenses related to administration and operation of the trust. I don't know what kinds of expenses the trust have, but we're talking about large dollars here. The trust is run, it's a volunteer organization. We support affordable housing administration through a different funding mechanism in town. What I wouldn't want to see is that we're seeing the trust spending, $150,000, $200,000 in administration if we give them $2 million.
Well, it's a good question. I don't think I think that would be seen as so irresponsible. I mean, that's not how they tend to spend their money. But Charles, can you respond to this?
No, I just would expect that it would be relatively small amount of money that
Sure.
they would need for administration.
Would you, Burton, argue that that 10% ought to be reduced? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, I'm guessing this is essentially based upon a template or a prior example, and that 10% seems like an awfully reasonable amount in the scheme of things. But it's also an invitation, right? That could be that administration expenses could go up, and I don't know. I'm just pointing it out to folks to consider, since it's not 10% of 100,000. It's 10% of, in this instance, $1 million. A little over $1 million.
John, thank you, Burton. Those are two important observations. John.
I think my question's similar to Burton's. Does this contemplate a specific project and commit us to specific funding of something? Or is it simply a concept that we could give if we do a grant to the trust? This is the arrangement, or this is the guiding language.
I thought project was an abstraction as I read it, not a specific project, but as we are committee, they are project. And that, so I saw it as abstract, but this may be a legal, this may not be wise. So
yeah, I mean, this goes to the discussion I think that we had earlier about, are we providing them unrestricted funds, but for the purpose of affordable housing, or are we, for example, directing the funding to go to Assabet Bluffs or to the replacement for at Junction Village, right? And I thought that the word we got from the trust and other, the other housing committees was it should be unrestricted to provide the trust the maximum flexibility. I was never super comfortable with that. Because I view us as our charge as a committee is to review specific, I mean, not to just dole out money into 3 categories of spend, but, or is it 4 categories of spend, but rather to pick particular projects. That's why I would like to see the appendix describing the project, because maybe there could be some more specifics put in there.
terrific. So we have 2 questions then. Where's the appendix? Because it was conspicuously absent. And is the 10% too large? Sarah.
Well, just related to the 10%, I wondered if it would be appropriate to put in a maximum amount, or a certain amount of dollars that would be reasonable. Just a thought. I don't know what that amount would be, but yeah.
How would we determine that even?
Probably through discourse, Nancy. I mean, speculation here. Probably through discourse with the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust and to see.
Okay, so discourse you're talking about.
Discourse, figure out whether
it might be standard practice.
But as someone wisely suggested,
Somebody suggested that
this is a template that's been copied and pasted.
Okay.
Keith has done a lot of work, as you all know. I presume you all know he's done a lot of work with CPC and funding in his own work in his own life. And so this is one that he really would like to get in place. It's so interesting because he has said many times publicly and privately that working closely with the CPC is something he really appreciates, because I think he feels that we are a collaborative organization, given our interest in affordable housing. And so that seems that in many ways motivates this particular action. D. Oh, wise counselor, what do you have to say? D, hello. She's either unmuting or
yeah, I'm unmuting and here I am. Sorry. I think this is a really interesting request from the trust, and I'm wondering if you have contacted the CPC at the state level to see if this is actually legal in terms of how, or appropriate or legal, whatever the definition would be, in terms of how the CPC has been constructed.
I talked with Stuart, I wrote
Stuart
Stuart. back-
Saganor?
Yeah, wrote back to me saying that this is something that's done in many, many, many towns and cities across Massachusetts. This kind of established relationship, but it depends on what exists. It could be a housing, it could be a housing. Our particular structure is different than a lot of other structures. But the Concord Housing Development Corporation, for instance, that might be the only such entity in other villages and cities and towns across the state. And sometimes it's that association or that representation.
So then my follow-on question would be, what do you anticipate that you'll maybe be receiving a similar request from the Recreation Department? Where else? Open space, maybe from the Planning Department? And then how do you control this?
Well, I don't let this, it's a wonderful question. I don't want to be the only one responding. Can other people respond? And then I will make a suggestion that I don't think we're beholden to anything, Dee, by crafting this agreement, except an understanding that where possible, we work collaboratively.
Well, I do think it's a slippery slope, right? Especially, and maybe even if we're just setting precedent with respect to housing dollars, right? That it may become, because gosh, wouldn't it be easy if somebody didn't have to go, have a project all permitted or planned out, if they can just
Right.
come and say, hey, we know we have a continuous and dire need for housing funds. So this year we're going to make another $500,000 request or another $1 million request. And then wouldn't this committee be so much less interesting to serve on?
Well, it's a good point. I hadn't seen that's I hadn't foreseen that's what would happen. It's very interesting, Charles.
My assumption was that it would, the project would have to be, see, that's the thing, but it does bother me because we always give our money for projects, basically, that are defined. And so my assumption was that the CHDC is going to come and say, we want to use this money for Assabet Bluff, we want to use, or maybe some of the money for Junction Village, and then that's a firm commitment of our funds, and that they just haven't done that yet. But I would think that we need to see that. But because they're the ones they're going to be using the money either way.
I think it also, I just wanted to add, I think it also puts our CPC in a situation where you go to town meeting and yes, we've done this, but how can you then say this is exactly what they're going to be doing with the funds? And that's what the townspeople are voting on. They vote on each one of those projects. So I'm just having a difficult time in understanding it, and I appreciate the fact that you're letting me speak.
Oh my gosh, no, Dee, we are grateful for your insights, and I think you and Burton have some interesting points to offer. Burton and then Paul.
Well, forgive me, it's been a while since our meetings and it runs together. Have we already, I mean, has this funding already been granted to them under our special meeting? So this is with respect to.
I had thought it was an abstraction to support the $1 million and million, whatever it is, 44,000, blah, blah, blah. That we were going to be forwarding to them, that this cemented that understanding.
But what does our article at town meeting say about this funds, right? Because this is the agreement that should be memorializing what we've already approved or will be approving in the article. And I think we've actually sort of already crossed this bridge, for better or for worse, that we did talk about it being a general appropriate, to spend at their discretion.
We did, and we voted at the special town meeting to move
Mhm.
our money, to move our money from our reserve to us. And now in the next one, we have the warrant article, which moves that money over to the Concord Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So, and we agreed not to put strings on it, Burton, given the conversations that we
Right.
had.
And so
Um,
just really quickly, and then I'll shut up for a good while. I think that we kind of are already down this path. It would nonetheless, I'd like to see how they describe the project so that, you know, we can get a little bit more sense of that. They probably didn't draft that because the template anticipated something more concrete rather than a general description. But I think we've sort of already set the precedent on that prior vote, and we just should be thinking about this as we go forwards, that in the future, maybe we want to get back, insist on project by project.
I would
Correct.
think we could always insist on project by project. I mean, I think that that's our charge, and that's our way, our modus operandi, I think, Burton. But I hadn't seen this agreement as being an interference with that, but that's my lack of legal knowledge. And that's the reason you and John are here. So, I mean, besides your brilliance and your gorgeous looks. Okay, John, go ahead.
Well, this does take me back to when I was chair and the first conversation with Keith Bergman about, well, we need to find a way to collaborate. We need to find a working agreement for the future. So now I'm confused whether this is simply a confirmation of what's going to be in the warrant article that as we've just been discussing, or is this an agreement about some general ongoing working relationship?
It's the latter, John.
It's what?
It's the latter, an ongoing agreement in terms of really, Paul, I'm sorry, I come right back to you. It's an ongoing agreement. It's not about the warrant article.
Okay.
So
well,
it is
all the more-
specific to the, it's specific to the $1 million grant that was part of the that was Article 28 at back.
I don't
That
think
is-
it says that, because that, it doesn't say
Yeah.
that.
I'm
project.
hearing two different things now from Diane and Burton.
Okay.
So what do you, what Burton and John, from your reading of it, did you think it was directly pertinent to that
I
warrant?
can't tell without the appendix. I can't
Okay.
tell without the appendix whether it's
Right.
about the current warrant article, or it's about, as Keith suggested to me many years ago, we need a future collaborative relationship in which we have, it's kind of what Dee's talking about, in which we have some special standing with you,
Right.
as against everybody else in the world.
As against everybody else in the world. I want to call on Ann, Paul. I hate to skip you.
ahead.
But I think Ann may have some information. Go ahead, Ann.
Right, and I apologize for causing all this confusion. So this was not something that the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust submitted to the CPC. This was just a formula that's out on the Community Preservation Coalition website. You all had mentioned, many months ago that you had wanted a draft put together. So this is really something that you should be discussing with them, since this is, coming out of nowhere, really. So that's why there is no exhibit. This has not been submitted to us. This is just a formula.
Okay, Paul, and then Eve.
Wow. I'll show you my confusion. So this Article 28 already says that this money goes to the trust and they can spend at their discretion.
Right.
The grant seems to say the same thing. It doesn't require a project. I viewed the grant similar to when we fund any project. We codify that, we memorialize that with a grant to the Recreation Commission or whoever's going to. So this is not exactly the same thing, but it's in parallel. It's an agreement between the CPC and the receiver of the funds.
Right.
But in this case, there's no specific project, and that's the only difference. And I think since Article 28 says there's no specific project, I don't think we can jam in a project into this grant agreement.
I don't think this is, Ann, correct me, but I don't think it has anything to do with our warrant article. It has to do with crafting a relationship, as John suggests, with the Municipal Housing Trust Fund, which Dee suggests might be not a wise thing, and Burton also wonders whether that is wise. Eve, go ahead.
I think, I can't remember where I saw this, but there are definitely other towns that have funds that distribute their housing project money, but I don't read this as that. I think that this is a formula for dealing with the $1 million particularly. And that I didn't understand what until Anne mentioned that this was not coming from the trust, but if we have already given this money to the trust, and this agreement is between the town and the trust for how they're going to keep records on the project and explain, what portions of the funds are going to administrative and other types of legalese down at the bottom. We could use this if we want to see what's happening to that $1 million, but it might become a precedent for further disbursements, but I think this really is just about the $1 million, Diane. It's not, it's maybe a precedent for further relationship with them, but anyway, that's my only comment.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
And I'm sorry, I don't know if we vote on this or not, or if it's just something to be
No,
discussed and then put down.
I think we've had a good discussion. Let's see if we have a recommendation for how to proceed. I'm hearing more that this did not come from them. It emerged because Anne heard us say that we wondered whether we needed a formal relationship with the fund, the trust fund. And so she brought this to our attention. And so therefore, the reason there's no appendix, which I thought was strange, because I thought it was they that sent it to us, because there was no appendix occur. And I think we're hearing sufficient. So help me if you disagree. What I'm hearing is sufficient apprehension about crafting such a relationship that perhaps we should just say thank you very much for sending this to us. And right now we're not inclined to go ahead and agree with or sign such an agreement.
Well,
Unless-
Anne, where did it come from?
Came
From
from
the
Ann.
coalition website. I think I had shared that with you a
This
while
day.
back, but
So,
Right.
so the trust has never seen this.
It doesn't sound like it.
correct.
I thought
Nope.
they had.
The only reason for going
And
ahead
the-
with this,
but
if
Town
we
council
think we,
hasn't seen it. Sorry.
Okay.
go ahead.
if we think we need this, then we should go ahead with it. If we don't think we need it, then
Then
we shouldn't.
yeah, Nancy Nelson.
I just think there's no reason to abandon the idea that we would like to have a more codified relationship with the trust. Just because we've seen one model doesn't mean there aren't others, and doesn't mean that we can't continue to have conversations with them if we think an ongoing relationship is something that would be beneficial, right?
So I
This is just the beginning of a discussion.
Right. That's wonderful. So Nancy and everyone, do we have to have a formal codification, or do we just have a collective agreement and understanding that we work cheek by jowl with the fund and with the Concord Affordable Housing Development Corporation, that that this is something we do on a regular basis when we're trying to cobble together a project, and the resources that we need or can, where we can, bring to bear on such a project. Maybe we don't need formal codification at all.
Town council may recommend that you do have formal codification, but maybe you all don't need to decide that now. Maybe once the funds are transferred and it's gone through town meeting, this will just be another one of the, memorandum of a grant of understanding or grant agreement that the town council puts together, along with all of the others.
Okay,
Just roll it in.
so town council has recommended that we do this?
No,
No.
they may. I'm guessing that they will, since they have for every other project that every other award that you've granted.
Right.
I'm expecting that they would.
That they're going to say that we need a formal relationship with them?
At least for the $1 million.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you're right. It's all about the $1 million.
Right.
Well, and we have a grant agreement with every project, right? This
Right.
is just a
Yes, we do.
unique form of grant agreement, given the that it's a housing trust.
Right.
And town meeting vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So
Okay.
Eve,
Oh.
you have,
Yeah, so I guess my question is in the absence of a project and in the presence of $1 million that is in this trust, I think what our conversations, or at least what I remember from like why we wanted to talk more about how that money would be used is because we wouldn't be seeing any kind of application directly to us. And this agreement, for what it's worth down at the bottom, does have the record keeping section and a couple of other sections that talk about how we would get to see how that $1 million would be spent. Not just we, but like all of Concord, it would be public record how that money was being spent. And so for the $1 million, I mean, I think it's a good idea to have something down in writing saying that, you know, maybe it doesn't require our vote, but at least it's public knowledge, you know, and maybe I just don't know enough about how the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust works, if all of their records are public. But if it's not, then this is a good way to do that for that $1 million, particularly since it's a large amount and there's no project yet specified, right? Does that make sense?
yeah, and Eve, their comportment is very public.
Okay.
Their meetings are very public. They like to work collaboratively with the select board. The select board doesn't really, is not empowered to tell them what to do, but given the nature, at least of the present leadership, what they say, and I presume they mean it sincerely, is that we want to collaborate with the select board. We want your approval when we do things. We want to work together on things. We don't want to just head off on our own. So I mean, it's a very, you know, I've attended all of their meetings this winter and fall, and you know, they really are very thoughtful about how they move forward in their deliberations and considerations and their public minutes and everything else.
So for example, would an applicant for CPC housing money come to us and also to the trust for funding, or is it one or the other?
That's, you know, that would be up to the applicant. They could come to both of us because there is money that they have. And they have close to $2 million right now, so that, you know, they could, you know, people could apply to them and apply to us. I mean, there would not be no one would crawl foul, I think, if they were to do so. So, Charles.
I'd like to suggest that we forward this template to the housing, to the trust. And I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with this as a boilerplate type agreement, and see what they say about it, and then have further discussions.
That sounds prudent.
Exactly.
Well done. Everyone think that makes sense?
Yeah, I agree.
So we'll let them get as confused as we are. And then we'll come back together and say, aha. Okay. Thank you, Charles, for that good advice. And Anne, would you be so kind, please, as to forward this with an explanatory cover letter?
I will do that.
Trust. Thank you very much. Let's review the minutes of 11:1, 11:15, and 1:3 for any, if there are any substantial concerns. We need to get Eve's name spelled properly, and I have some very small corrections that are not consequential and do not influence the vote. Nancy Nelson.
I have just one thing on 11:15. There was a discussion about private funding with CPA funds, and correctly, the minutes correctly note that I did consult with somebody who knows all about this. But I'd like also to include, I hope I said it at the meeting, that the Community Preservation Coalition does have under their technical assistance tab a brief article about the funding of private projects, private property projects with CPA funds. And it's interesting because it's possible if they're, you know, they say it's possible, but it depends. So that's a very interesting article, and it's short.
Well, why don't we append it to the minutes, Nancy?
Oh, okay.
We'll have an appendix, and there'll really be one there. So
Yeah, That's a great idea. Okay,
Why don't we append that article? That's a terrific idea.
I'll send you, Anne. And that's all I had.
Thank you. Anybody else have any corrections? Hearing none,
Uh,
I think
Yeah, I found a small one on the November 15th, but I think you'll spot it. It's just a period that doesn't need to be there.
yeah, there are a lot, there's some little things like
Missed
that.
that one. Missed
Yeah.
that.
I noticed 3 or 4 very tiny things, but they don't interfere with the essence of the minutes. I think we can pass them and then send on anything that we notice to Anne. So we can do all 3 of those minutes at once by somebody making a motion. Burton,
I make a motion that we pass with the comments made, all 3 of the minutes that were presented for approval at the meeting tonight.
I second.
thank you. Discussion. Hearing no discussion, let's vote. Charles,
Aye.
Burton.
Aye.
Eve,
Yes.
Sarah,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Nancy,
I,
John,
Yes,
and I also am yes, that's a unanimous vote, and we do so declare. The public hearing went, I think, pretty well. This is kind of under rubric new business. The public hearing went pretty well. I didn't get tarred and feathered, and there seemed to be general approval of what we were, of how we were going forward on all 3 of our articles. If you have a chance to review those tapes to see if you have any concerns about anything presented or said that you wish would be said differently or presented differently at the regular town meeting, I would appreciate any observation or suggestion that you would like to forward my way. One of the things we agreed is that we would try to hold a public hearing on the sooner side rather than the later side for people who might wish to make application for next year's funding, and not make this, so late in the year that people don't have time to do it. And it seems to me, looking at the calendar, that the best time to do that might be in either April or May. And that would give people, if it were in May, June, July, August, September, that would give people 5 months. If we want to go back to April, that gives people 6 months, which then gives town budget making and everything else more advanced notice. So the possibility is to have a public hearing in April and try to get that on the docket. We don't want to go too late in April because we're heading right into town meeting and obligations that people have. So we'd probably need to do it in the week. Patriots weekday is probably not a good one because I think, can somebody help me? I believe that's the public school holiday. Right?
yes,
From the
The
6th
Yes.
2nd of April.
second, right? So we'd either have to go before that, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, or we could do it 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, which is, as I said, is abutting the town meeting. So can I hear us?
Diane, so on the calendar, we have 2 informational meetings, which I assume were public informational meetings, one on the 18th of April, one on the 16th of May. Could we not substitute one for the other? Because it seems like I think the public meeting would accomplish what we want to do with the informational meetings. So I think it's a great idea, but I'm just wondering, do we need 2 informational meetings and a public meeting, or?
I just think I want to honor, Paul, what we all said about making sure we make
Yeah,
it possible for people to approach us about questions they have in anticipation. And the problem with the 18th, at least as I see it, is that it's a public school vacation week, which means
okay.
that, I mean, the chances of people really using that as an, I think families are completely consumed at that point, and so are a lot of other people. So if we use the 18th, do we dare go as late as the 16th of May, which gives people just 5 months to get everything organized? Or do we want to find an alternative date in April, backing up either to the 11th or scooting ahead to the 25th. And I just want your advice and thoughts about that.
I'm okay with May.
You're
Yeah.
okay with,
Seems like plenty of time.
all right. Then Anne, let's count May 16th
Okay,
as a meeting, but also a public hearing for CPC, okay? So that people can,
do you mean the public information session or a
Information.
public hearing?
well, I don't know,
Okay.
you're now bumping into language that is probably more formal than I meant at a public
Oh,
information session.
Okay, okay,
Okay.
So,
The-
so would we not do the 18th with that
Well,
meeting?
we can do it, Paul, but we've never had anybody come.
Well, I was going to mention one thing related to either or both of those. I think that we should, one of us, or we should craft an article for the bridge.
Okay,
We should publicize this, and you and I had talked about this, Diane, at least giving the CPC some visibility, what we are, what we do, and then combine that with this informational meeting. So I think we get greater attendance if we did that. And I'd volunteer to draft something
okay,
along those lines for you to take a look at, but, sooner than later, and then we could repeat it. Does that make sense?
yeah, makes a lot of sense, Paul.
Okay.
Inviting people to come on the 18th to our regular meeting if they wish to, and then understanding that there will be a rather formal invitation on the 16th of May.
We can mention both.
Yeah, that's what I mean, yeah.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Okay.
I just think I want to be courteous to people who may want to do something, and I think on public school vacation week, where that's not an opportune time for a lot of Concord families. And
Okay,
people,
so I'll take a shot at that. I know that the editor-in-chief is very sensitive to the length of those articles.
yes, she is.
I personally have got scars over that discussion, but
Okay.
so
There's
we'll
also
do
the
that.
fact that we have our town, so many of our requests come from the town and various town committees, if you who are requesting things. And I'm also was cognizant on the 18th that you're abutting the town meeting when our town employees are about as busy as they can possibly be. And so I wanted to make sure that we did something in May, as long as we all agreed, or earlier in April, as long as we all agreed that that was okay. Okay, and last but not least, there is on the 12th of April a housing committee roundtable at 7 o'clock at, I believe, Harvey Wheeler. And I think that it would be really wonderful if as many of us on this committee as can would attend. It's meant to bring together all the different housing factors. Is being organized by Liz Rust. We can send an invitation out to everybody on this committee, and if you would do that, it would be fantastic. And just, if you have the time on the 12th at 7 o'clock, it would be terrific to have a lot of us there to hear the strategies they're looking at the housing plan, production plan. They're talking about the strengths, weaknesses, challenges. It's really a fantastic open forum for that discussion. So if you can, please put it on your calendar and join in that discussion. And tomorrow night at the library, there is a DEI discussion from 5 to 7 about being a welcoming community, being hosted by a consortium of interests in town, from the League of Women Voters to the DEI Commission. And during that discussion, I suspect affordable housing will emerge as a question and a discussion. And Burton, with all your planning background, on that 12th, I think there'll be some discussion about the state rule about getting housing near
The MBTA Communities Act.
And my understanding is that what the state has said is this is not something we'd like you to do. This is not a request. This is a requirement. So it's something you must do. So, some towns are challenging it. Others are saying, yeah, this is good advice. So anyway, I think the more that we can be well informed about all of this, the better. So.
And I'm sorry, you're saying that's at the DEI
No,
meeting?
that's 12th of April. But the DEI one, may come up, but that's not its major purpose.
Okay,
It's how to be a welcoming community. But
I
I
see. Okay,
suspect affordable housing will emerge as one of the topics. So
Okay.
if you are so interested, that's taking place in the library.
At 7?
From 5 to 7, John.
Diane,
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know that the April 12th roundtable is already on my calendar because Anne is way ahead of you and already sent out a notification of that today, and I read it. And I'm
Ah.
super excited for that.
Oh, good. Today, Anne, go to it. You go. That's
I'm
wonderful.
happy to send it again when we get closer to the date too.
No, that's wonderful, Eve. Thank you for both noticing and complimenting Anne for her good work. Okay, is there any other business? D, how are we doing? A minus, B plus, where are we? D?
You're doing swell.
Okay.
You're doing swell.
Okay.
It's a good meeting. And I also wanted to comment just very quickly that the presentation made by the consultants, you and I were sitting next to each other. It was an excellent presentation, and Delia was there with her phone and trying to figure out the sizes of all of the other, skating rinks around town. It was really quite good. And the comments that were made, from my hearing, it seemed as though there was a predominance of people saying, yeah, the dam seems like a reasonable option. But there was also a group that were very concerned about not having adequate space for their ice skating in the winter that they so enjoyed.
Right. And there were people who live on the pond and bought houses
Right.
to buy the pond.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But it was the consultants are right on, because I do have a background in water resources engineering, and I just really appreciated their opening remarks about the water finds its way.
That's gorgeous.
It's so true. It's so true. So thank you very much. And it's a great meeting as usual.
Thank you so much. Okay. May I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Hearing no alternatives. Bye.
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 Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.